Tonight, a gut punch for Canada's steel industry, 1,000 workers facing layoffs.
A lot of nervousness. Folks are very, very worried.
Just weeks before Christmas, Canada is facing an economic shock that cuts far deeper than any winter cold. Because this time, it isn't the weather threatening a community, it's the sudden loss of its industrial heartbeat. In northern Ontario, Algoma Steel has set off one of the biggest mass layoffs the country has seen this year, a decision that instantly reshaped the future of an entire city. Earlier today, the company confirmed 1,000 layoffs, more than one-third of its entire workforce, hitting a community of just 72,000 people in Sault Ste. In a place where steelmaking isn't just a job but a generational anchor, families woke up to the news that the work they believed was secured, backed by $400 million in federal loans and another $100 million from Ontario, will not make it into the new year. For workers, the word they keep repeating is devastating. For local leaders, the timing borders on cruel. And for Algoma, the explanation points squarely across the border. U.S. Steel tariffs driving costs higher, squeezing margins, and forcing the company to shut down its blast furnace and coke-making operations. What was supposed to be a long, gradual transition to electric arc steelmaking is now being rushed forward a full year ahead of schedule. But tonight, the story is no longer just about one mill. It's about the shockwave now moving through Canada's manufacturing base, about the communities bracing for hundreds of newly unemployed workers, and about the country's struggle to shield itself when American policy shifts with little warning. Economists, policymakers, and industry leaders are watching the fallout closely, because the questions raised tonight reach far beyond Northern Ontario. They cut to the core of Canada's economic resilience, and whether the country can still protect its industrial workforce in a continental market growing more unstable by the month. Tonight, the pressure is building on multiple fronts, and the strain is now visible not only in Sault Ste. But across several corners of the country. As residents digest the scale of Algoma's layoffs, a second, quieter crisis is taking shape, one that underscores how deeply the U.S. tariffs have disrupted Canada's economic rhythm. In the Sioux, officials warn that the city simply cannot absorb 900 to 1,000 newly unemployed workers. The mayor is pushing Ottawa and Queen's Park to fast-track stalled regional projects, including a long-planned deep-sea port, arguing that without rapid intervention, the local economy could face a cascading downturn. Ontario, recognizing the urgency, announced a new support center for impacted workers, offering retraining and transition programs. But for families still reeling, the path forward remains painfully unclear. Beyond Northern Ontario, signs of tariff-driven turbulence are emerging elsewhere. In Amherstburg, workers at the Diageo Crown Royal bottling plant spent what many described as a somber final day under the closure agreement. The plant will officially shut down in February, taking 200 jobs with it, another blow to a region already anxious about cross-border uncertainty. Several companies have expressed interest in buying the facility, but no confirmed lifeline has been offered yet, and the repercussions continue to ripple outward. Stellantis, one of the world's largest automakers, is now compelled to appear before a parliamentary committee after skipping a scheduled hearing about its decision to shift Jeep production from Brampton, Ontario, to U.S.-based facilities. Executives blame technical issues for missing the meeting, but MPs are openly skeptical, pressing for answers on whether American tariffs or American incentives factored into the move. Even consumer behavior is shifting. A Bank of Montreal survey finds that 3 in 5 Canadians are adjusting holiday spending due to tariff anxiety, with 37% prioritizing made-in-Canada gifts. What began as a trade dispute is now influencing how families shop, how businesses plan, and how communities prepare for the months ahead. Across Canada tonight, the message is unmistakable. The pressure is mounting, and every sector is feeling the strain. While the public fights through the noise of layoffs, closures, and tariff anxiety, something far quieter is unfolding beneath the surface. Canada is beginning to reposition itself, not with the bombast of retaliation, but with the steady, methodical moves of a country that understands the long game. And today, those moves are becoming harder to miss. In Ottawa, discussions that once seemed hypothetical have accelerated. Alberta and the federal government are now openly mapping the early stages of a westbound energy corridor, one that could shift the balance of continental trade. A new pipeline, long dismissed as politically impossible, is suddenly back on the table. But unlike past attempts, This one begins with a markedly different tone. No federal override, no forced path. Instead, a recognition that any route must be built through indigenous consent and provincial alignment, not around them. British Columbia has signaled it's willing to talk, cautiously, conditionally, and with the tanker ban intact. Industry veterans point to alternate routes through Prince Rupert, Kitimat, or even a parallel build along the existing Trans Mountain corridor. Each comes with unique challenges. Each also represents a potential escape hatch from U.S.-dominated export infrastructure. And this is where the story shifts. Because even as American tariffs squeeze Canada's steel sector, they are also accelerating the logic for creating independent pathways to global markets. Diversification is no longer a concept, it's a survival strategy. By opening early consultations and widening the map of possible port destinations, Canada is quietly countering U.S. pressure, not with confrontation, but with rerouting. Behind closed doors, officials describe this moment as an inflection point, the kind of structural rethink that only happens when old assumptions break. While Washington raises barriers, Canada is sketching out corridors that lead elsewhere, to Asia, to Europe, to energy buyers who aren't interested in using trade as leverage. It's a subtle shift, almost easy to miss beneath the headlines of layoffs and tariffs. But make no mistake, a quiet counterstrike is underway, and Canada is preparing its next move. Across the country, the strain of the moment is revealing something deeper. The old systems Canada once relied on, fuel pricing formulas, court staffing models, regional service networks, are beginning to buckle. It's easy to see the Algoma layoffs as an isolated economic story, but the aftershocks are exposing structural weaknesses that have been building for years, now pushed to the surface by cross-border instability. In New Brunswick, the government's attempt to ease fuel costs collided head-on with the realities of the retail market. Premier Holt promised that scrapping the provincial carbon surcharge would bring an immediate drop of 8 cents per litre. But 3 days before the change was set to take effect, the province's energy regulator reversed course, siding with retailers who warned that without a temporary replacement charge, as many as a quarter of gas stations could go under. Prices stayed exactly the same. Consumers felt misled. And what began as a simple policy promise became a clear example of how fragile the supply chain has become when margins tighten. Hundreds of kilometers away, Newfoundland and Labrador confronted a different kind of pressure point: its justice system. In Street Johns, entire courtrooms shut their doors today. Traffic cases, small claims, and even some rural circuit schedules were indefinitely postponed, catching lawyers, defendants, and even sheriff's officers completely off guard. Staffing shortages that once seemed manageable have now grown severe enough to halt proceedings across 5 courthouses. Union leaders warn that sheriffs are leaving for policing and corrections in other provinces, draining talent from a system that cannot function without them. Taken together, these disruptions reveal a country under internal strain just as it faces intensifying external pressure. Policies meant to protect consumers stall. Regional justice networks seize up. Critical services struggle to keep pace with demand. What we're witnessing isn't isolated breakdown. It's a sign that Canada's institutional machinery is being forced to evolve under stress. And the unanswered question tonight is whether these cracks will widen, or whether they'll push Canada toward the kind of modernization it can no longer put off. Tonight, as Canadians grapple with economic uncertainty at home, events far beyond our borders are forcing the country to confront a different kind of pressure, one tied not to tariffs or trade flows, but to violence, accountability, and Canada's place in an increasingly volatile world. And in the midst of that tension, a disturbing story has emerged involving one of our own. A Canadian activist from British Columbia is recovering after what she describes as a brutal assault by masked Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Armed with rifles and clubs, they allegedly beat her and 3 Italian colleagues for more than 15 minutes, kicking her in the head, ribs, hip, and legs, then dousing the group with gasoline and threatening to burn the home they were protecting. She says these attacks have become daily occurrences in the region, and she plans to return once she recovers. Her message was stark. What happened to her is horrific, but nothing compared to the Palestinian experience. Global Affairs Canada issued a restrained but firm statement, condemning what it called extremist settler violence, and reaffirming Canada's position that West Bank settlements are illegal under international law. The United Nations added context of its own. More than 260 settler attacks reported in October, the highest monthly total since 2006. At the same time, Washington faces its own storm. U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is under heavy scrutiny after an operation targeting an alleged Venezuelan drug boat resulted in a second strike, one aimed at survivors struggling in the water. Legal experts warn this could constitute a war crime. The controversy only deepened when Hegseth posted an AI-generated parody of Franklin the Turtle, the Canadian children's icon, reimagined as a military commando. The publisher denounced the image as a violation of everything Franklin represents: empathy, kindness, and innocence. And this is where Canada's role shifts. At a time when global actors bend the rules, weaponize images, or push military boundaries, Canada's voice, measured, legalistic, and grounded in humanitarian norms, stands out sharply. The country is not escalating. It is not matching aggression with aggression. Instead, it is anchoring itself in international law, distancing its identity from the spiraling rhetoric abroad. But this raises a pivotal question. As global tensions rise, can Canada's moral clarity translate into real influence, or will the world's drift toward harder power test the limits of Canada's quiet diplomacy? Across Canada tonight, a different kind of tension is taking shape, one that doesn't look like crisis at first glance, but instead feels like the early signs of a national turning point. Because while the headlines are filled with layoffs and tariffs, closures and courtroom delays, another story is quietly unfolding underneath. Canadians are beginning to adapt, to shift, and to choose differently. The country's response is no longer just reactive, it's becoming intentional. Holiday surveys show it clearly. 3 in 5 Canadians are tightening their budgets, adjusting to an economic climate reshaped by American tariffs and global instability. But here's the unexpected part. Instead of retreating into anxiety, many are redirecting their spending inward. 37% say they're prioritizing Canadian-made products this season, an instinct that goes beyond patriotism. It's a strategy, a recalibration of where value flows and who benefits. Shoppers tell reporters they're willing to pay a little more if it means supporting Canadian businesses, and those businesses are noticing. Retailers and manufacturers report a rise in demand for homegrown goods, everything from clothing to specialty food to hardware, adding billions to domestic GDP and supporting thousands of jobs. Even as households cut back overall, they're choosing deliberately where the remaining dollars go. Beyond the checkout line, we're seeing this shift reflected in culture and community. Vancouver, for example, has erupted in excitement as the Whitecaps prepare for their first ever MLS Cup final, against none other than Lionel Messi's Inter Miami. It's more than sports hype. It's a moment of national confidence, a reminder that Canadian teams, Canadian talent, and Canadian markets can command international attention. Stadiums are filling, merchandise is flying off shelves, and a city long overshadowed in North American pro sports suddenly finds itself at center stage. At the same time, public institutions are confronting their own limits and being pushed, sometimes abruptly, toward reform. New Brunswick's fuel price reversal has reopened a conversation about the transparency of provincial pricing systems. Newfoundland and Labrador's court postponements are forcing an overdue examination of justice system staffing and infrastructure. These are not signs of collapse. They are stress tests, painful but clarifying, exposing where Canada must modernize to stay resilient. Threaded through all of this is a larger realization. Canada is entering a phase of economic and institutional self-examination, accelerated not by choice, but by necessity. The country is learning, under pressure, where its vulnerabilities lie, and where its strengths can be amplified. A national reflex is forming. When one door closes abroad, Canadians turn inward, reinforce what they have, and build something new. And yet, the biggest questions remain unresolved. How much more strain will the Canadian economy face before the trade landscape stabilizes? Will emerging buy Canadian habits endure beyond the holiday season? Can the quiet reorientation of supply chains and energy routes truly insulate Canada from future shocks? And perhaps most importantly, in a world becoming louder, harder, and more unpredictable, will Canada's steady, deliberate approach be enough to chart a path forward? These are the questions we'll continue to follow as Canada, step by cautious step, reshapes the foundations of its economic future. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned, stay curious, and stay engaged.